Great that everyone's here and welcome. I'm Mark Edgoose, I'm the host today. I won't say much about myself until a little bit later. But first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people as the traditional owners of this unceded and stolen land, and acknowledge and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. The Abbotsford Convent is located on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I welcome any First Nations people who are here with us today. And it's terrific to acknowledge our Indigenous people. I've had the fortune to work with two groups of Indigenous students in a program called Black Design, where they've been making jewellery in a very intensive way. And if you're in the city at the Curio Heritage Trust, they've got their exhibition on at the moment. So it's terrific to be able to engage our First Nations people in these pursuits of creativity that we all so much love ourselves. The panellists are just going to introduce themselves. So,
sure. Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? No. Maybe I'll use this. My name is Georgie Brunmayr. I started Curio practice around 2 years ago. I come from a strong textile line. I have a lot of background of technical knitting, and that gave me a really strong foundation to build Curio. I work with local fibres and a local knitting factory to produce a homewares products, and it's kind of expanding into a few different products now, but mainly knitted or made in Australia.
Can you hear me? Apparently I've got
a
natural thing with the... I'm going to try it. We're going to see what happens.
Go.
My name's Shelley Simpson. I'm the creative director and founder of Art Australia. I make porcelain and have been doing it for nearly 30 years. We have all our manufacturing is in Sydney, in Marrickville. Everything is made by artisans in that space. And we have our wholesale, trade and retail stores. Now we're up to our 10th retail store and online in 3 continents. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tess, Lloyd. I'm the General Manager at Art Australia. I work with Shelley, and I have done for 6 years. Before that, I had a business called Polli, which was a creative business where we made homewares and jewellery in Sydney, and I studied industrial design.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm Dowel, Hardiman. I'm spread across kind of 3 projects simultaneously that do 3 different things, but the one that most people know me for is Dow Jones as a co-founder and director. Our focus for the past 8 years has been on producing locally manufactured furniture at what could be an accessible price point for locally manufactured furniture, and we've just tried to have a lot of fun in the past 8 years. Yeah,
terrific. So there's an outline of what our wonderful panellists have been up to. I guess I'm quite interested in starting with this topic of how to grow your business. So I thought, when Tess, and I hope Tess doesn't mind me saying this, but when she first approached me to host this panel, her voice message came through a transcript, and her voice message said, "Hi, this is Tess calling from Murderer in Sydney." So with that in mind, I thought I can't resist to be the host of this panel. So it's a great beginning for me. But probably more importantly, I was very interested in hosting it because this is a path I'm hoping to embark on. And so I'm here to learn a lot about perhaps how we start and how we begin. And so I sort of thought to myself, because we're going to ask these guys about why and how and when, of course. But I sort of felt, well, why do I want to do that? And for me, my practice has really been around around an exhibition practice, a one-off practice, a commission practice. And I guess I've got a little bit jaded with the lack of democracy in a practice like that. And so I sort of felt that, maybe, I might have in my later years the luxury of giving production of high quality work a crack. And so that's what I'm hoping to do. And I thought maybe in the audience, is there anyone who'd want to share perhaps why they're here and what they're hoping to achieve? Anyone brave enough? Surely. Great.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ann Sherman. I'm an American. I moved here in 2019. I've been doing ceramics since I was 8 years old, pursued it in university, but have also gone on to architecture and industrial design and other related fields to pay the bills. Post-COVID, I think it's a good, kind of fuck it moment. And so I've been teaching ceramics, and I'd like to, I've opened my own studio now, and I'm just kind of looking at the directions that it went in. I also have a background in social and environmental impact management, and so I also have a real mind for social enterprises and kind of community presence. So I'm really interested to meet everyone here today and hear what everyone has to say about this. Thanks.
Great. Well, that's a great introduction, because our panellists are experts on all those ambitions that you are, putting in front of yourself. And so and look, today is interactive. So I will occasionally jump up and ask something, and please jump up here if you feel so inclined and tell us something as well. So we want to make this a very relaxed and but very useful time. So the questions are for the panellists: why they do, what they do, and how have they achieved it. So it's a pretty broad way of getting them to sort of talk about what they've done. And so I thought I'd start with Curio, and I think your mic probably is working. Yep. So I'll keep this one away, and I'll prompt it by just saying I enjoyed the way in your website you used the word slow craftsmanship.
Yeah, I think a little bit of my background and why I chose that path is before I started Curio, I had been living in China where things are not slow, and the making system is can be a level of mass production, and it was amazing to see that level of production, how many shirts can be made in an hour, or the textile industry really at the epicenter of it. But when I came back to Australia, I really wanted to nurture and support the skills that we still have here, and it wasn't necessarily about even selling a product. It was making something at a really high level that I felt proud about, and I knew every step along the way. That I know where the wool comes from, I know who knits it, I know the technical requirements about it, but I know how it's finished, I know where it's packed, I know where my labels are made, I know everything along that, and for me that was really important to have such connection to every step, and it's not about making a certain amount of product per year to make, whatever it is that I need to, a kind of salary, but it's more to support a knitting at the time, and I'm looking at expanding into different materials now, but it was really about supporting this one knitting factory and what could be made there to support that and kind of introduce people again to knitting within Australia.
And so the idea of this slow making, what do you think? Because when I think about slow making, I think of also the consequence of material and what that has and how that can actually inform what we do and how we go about doing it as well.
Yeah, well, textiles as a whole, or material making more in fashion, is really bad. There's a lot of samples, a lot of different fibres that can be used. I try to use only natural materials, and the wool that I use is super durable, strong enough to be in the be on the home, be close to your skin. There's no nasty kind of coatings on top of it. It's very good. So I feel proud with having that fibre. The way that I designed it is to maximise how a knitting machine works. So it's the widest it possibly can be. There's very little steps that are needed outside of the knitting itself. So it's not overcomplicated, it's a very simple product, but every step is kind of considered and it takes time to make.
And as we all know, just because it's simple does not mean
it's not easy. There's many things that go wrong all the time.
Exactly. Okay, so maybe Shelley, if you want to talk about the why, when and how. And should we give Shelley a time limit? Because it could...
That's the hard thing, because it's nearly 30 years. So and I was thinking about what you were talking about with, being so connected and, businesses today and guys starting now. I was just saying earlier, I got my first mobile phone after I'd been in business for 2 years.
Wow.
And my first computer was like in year 5, and it was one of the blue Apple computers. I was so proud of it. And I had to shine it on the iMac and polish it. And that sound, I used to listen to the sound as it connected to the internet. So I didn't have the luxury of kind of, having all this stuff at my fingertips. And very much the why for me was I'd started pottering, and I didn't want to do another job. So I had no idea what I was doing because I hadn't studied at uni and I had no sort of history. I just had to make and go to markets and sell and make and go to markets and sell and speak to people in stores. And it just was incredibly fulfilling. The process of making, the process of selling, I enjoyed all of the aspects. And then as the business has evolved, it's been more challenging and more interesting. And, I still get on the floor and I still make things, but I spend a lot of time in retail and in meetings now. That's my new place, in meetings.
And do you find that you still have that passion for making?
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day. We've just got a new kiln, which is a 4,000 litre road kiln, which is for potters. It's a pretty impressive machine. And that opens and it's just joyous. The colour, we do 20 colours, and the colour palette you don't know until it's being unpacked or being opened, and it's just this rainbow of colour, and it's so exciting. And it's exciting every day. But it's exciting for me every day getting my plate and my cup and sitting down having my breakfast out of something I've made. I love that.
And it's probably not without exaggeration that there's not many careers that could probably do that for you. I'm thinking of probably politicians who always start off with a great ambition to change the world, and the cynical in me thinks a lot differently after they've been in it a few years. So it is incredible that the sort of creative practice, material creative practices, and that sort of serendipity that you talked about how the unexpected and you never know exactly what might be in front of you. So these are all great quests that we really work through. Tess.
I think the initial why for me when my business partner Maya and I started Polli was really to make things, and it was about collaboration. But I think over time it became about values and culture, and that was really important to me. So moving to mud with both businesses are carbon neutral, very similar sort of values about Australian manufacturing, about the way we treat people on the planet. That's sort of something that really drives me personally.
And when do you think that happened for you? That sort of shift from the joy of making and the change in material to actually thinking it's also involves the planet and people. And
we had actually at university we had a really great lecturer called John Broadbent that taught us design history, and he was such a great environmentalist. He saw all of this coming 20 years ago, 40 years ago probably, and he was such an inspiration in that area for my whole year, I think. You know, he really sort of hammered home the responsibility of being a designer and how, you know, essentially everything's made is designed by someone and that's their responsibility because it's left on the planet. But I think, you know, having your own business, you have the opportunity to make decisions, and that's where you can affect that trajectory of, you know, the imprint that you leave behind. When you're, you know, initially when I was in another role working for someone else, I didn't have that total control, and I think that really made it clear what my sort of values and purpose were.
Yep, fantastic. Yeah, I think we're all, you know, faced with these sort of ideas about what we do and how we go about doing it. Dale?
So 10 years ago, I was in third year industrial design at RMIT, and we did a course called Professional Practice, which was about looking to what you wanted to do once you finished university. And we'd done 3 years of industrial design and furniture design. It was really the first time anyone had asked us what we were going to do once we had the degree. And so my now business partner of 8 years and I just looked on Seek and looked at employment and realised there were no jobs. So I was a furniture designer and lighting designer. We were in third year university. I'm from Bendigo. My business partner's from Geelong. You know, we were naive enough to think, let's just start a business doing the thing that we thought might be a good idea. We looked at the market of what was actually happening at the time. You know, some of the most famous designers now have quite a few staff. Back then, they really had maybe one unpaid intern. And so we looked at the market of locally made furniture and thought, why are the prices just so high? So we went to the manufacturers around. You know, the thing you just have to do is cold call manufacturers, you know, calling factories in Lilydale and Dandenong and kind of say, can we get quotes on these products? And we found that the Australian manufacturers of lighting and furniture had these really high profit margins. And we thought, well, what's the point? You know, we wanted to enter the market and make Australian-made accessible for furniture and lighting. And so our competitor was selling an $800 light. Our manufacturing cost was basically identical, but we were selling ours at $290 retail. So we knew we'd take a smaller margin, but it meant that we could give this accessibility to people, to give them the allowance. You know, buying Australian-made didn't have to be a luxury. I mean, the prices are different now, but it meant that we entered the market in Australia 8 years ago with a $270 Australian-made chair. And our first restaurant we did was Broadsheet Restaurant, which meant that all of a sudden we had all these hospitality venues asking to buy our furniture. And really it was because they could afford to buy it. It was on par with buying another product. And over the past 8 years, you know, we've adapted the business. So yeah, outside of Dow Jones as well, I work on work that's just more kind of conceptual and theoretical, which looks at the ecology and environmentalism and materialism. And so they all feed in together into this one thing. And so Dow Jones has kind of become this hybrid business where we look at different systems of manufacture and try to make them as, you know, most people look at our business and think that the designs are really pared back, and it's because we design for efficiency. You know, we begin with aesthetic and efficiency, and that runs the whole way through. And so our purpose has now been to produce hopefully accessible Australian-made product.
Yeah, great. And you know, looking at your website as well, I saw a real love for collaboration, and the fact that your work seems to be very, you know, making spaces, so very spatially orientated in that, and you know, and about people as well. Just like MUD's, you know, very much about people and doing things better. But so I was, and I think you've half answered anyway, but that idea that how all those, that sort of collaborative practice informs the, you know, the object practice and vice versa, how that sort of, you know, the translation between, you know, working conceptually and then working to a price.
I mean, it all feeds into the same thing. Like, I remember I had a phone call from a curator of a very big institution saying you need to stop collaborating, you need to focus on your independent practice. And I thought that was a hilarious phone call to think that I needed to work with less people to be more successful. And I just kind of rejected that because, you know, I've always worked with people since, you know, the past 10 years of my career. My practice has been about other people. I've never been able to work by myself. I mean, I do produce solo work by myself, but I just find it so uninteresting, you know. I can only learn things that I can learn kind of actively on a computer or through talking to people. But in the experience of collaboration, like, you know, one of the most important things I learned kind of 15 years ago was, you know, you only know what you know, which is in reference to talking to people about or collaborating with people. Like, you know, you're always the least interesting person in a room because you already know everything you know. And so those conversations and collaborations, and Curio and I have talked about doing a collaboration for next year, and I think a lot of the time lost leaders are some of the most successful collaborations because you can really learn something from them. Yeah. Lost leader being a thing you do which isn't going to make any money.
That's right. Yeah.
They're the best projects. The best projects are the ones that don't make money.
Now we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty of what a creative practice might look like. And look, I've noticed everyone's been really talking about doing things better and making something well. So the quality of the work and the material used seems to be important, and I'm interested in that and your comments on that. Not only, and we'll get to later the sort of notion of why you do, in a sort of what I'm trying to say, a sustainable way, do that. But I'm drawn to sort of a comment that Richard Sennett wrote in The Craftsman. Really, he's a sociologist, and he talked about after the Second World War how Japan really went leaps and bounds in manufacturing and manufactured quality products, and he makes a comparison, fairly or unfairly, that in the Soviet Union that wasn't the case. That things were made very quickly and cheaply, and I guess without that pride is what he was sort of talking about. So I'm interested in your comments about how this filters through our world. How this idea of doing something well, not only the impact of it lasting, but the impact it has on people's lives and what they do.
I guess we would all have to think that we all have this similar drive. Like, we all think we're doing something well, whether it is done well or not. Whether the growth of your creative business is just to make money. There's different ideas around businesses. There's one which is just purely about raising capital, about getting richer, which is a lot of these kind of last 10 years of small businesses doing these things, selling on the internet as quick as possible and then moving on. But I feel like we all share a similar interest, which is about making better things. Like, if I can share a personal story about running Dow Jones, which I feel like is in reference to that, is that, when Adam and I were 22 and 20 years old, we couldn't find a steel fabricator. It's really hard as a student or as a young person to find a fabricator. And so I called a guy called Jeff, and he answered, and we had a great conversation. He agreed to do some prototyping for us. I got a call kind of 2 years after the beginning of that relationship. So I was 22, so I was 24, giving this guy called Jeff a call, and he was crying, and he's in his 60s, pretty staunch New Zealand guy. He welds with his cigarette in his mouth constantly, and he was crying. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "Well, we were on the verge of bankruptcy, and because we started making your furniture, we're now not bankruptcy anymore, and my son can take over the business. And 8 years on, they basically just make our furniture full time." And that's a relationship we could only create through working locally and someone trusting us. But that comes from an individual perspective where him and his son want to make better because they want this thing to continue for all of us. And that's I guess we talk about Australian manufacturing, is those fantastic relationships we have, and that every person involved in the creation of the product wants it to be better. I think that answers it. I don't know.
Yeah,
really.
And it's also a beautiful story.
Yeah. I like Jeff.
Yeah, so do I.
He's got to stop smoking, but I think...
I know, he really does.
We should get Jeff to do that.
Yeah.
And Shelley,
He's
are
busy
you?
with Dow Jones.
I think the COVID has sort of been an interesting time for us in relation to looking after people, and how do we navigate that? How do we try and keep our teams together? We employ 100 people at Mud and plus, and and how there was a moment when all that happened, and I started thinking about, I was annoyed that I hadn't done enough for the environment. I was annoyed that I hadn't done enough for my teams, and I couldn't afford to do it now. And how do I do this responsibly? And nobody's making, the politicians aren't doing anything. Nobody's doing anything to make it easier for me. And then I just had that light bulb moment of, I just have to do it for my team and for my family and for the people that come to our stores and my community. And we started this process, and it's been extraordinary. The team, we've looked at how to make careers at mud and be career potters at mud, and not just it being that job that you do until you find what you want to do. It's not, and it's so exciting because our teams are all leaning in, you know, all the people that were kind of bored and, you know, are now trying to create best practice. They're trying to do the stuff that I'm trying to do. And they all want to do it. It's not, you know, a select few. And that to me is really exciting, that the team are, that we're growing as a business, that we're getting better at what we're doing, and that they're getting the you know, for me it's not about making a ton of money, it's about making a lifestyle for the team and having a great place to go to work every day, and, you know, having a happy, healthy environment for me to spend my hours, and hopefully the rest of the team to do the same.
I think also in terms of you know, sustainability of the product and the longevity, always choosing the best materials, making in a way where you're making a product with high integrity, which you're doing obviously by product material specification, you know, using steel and using durable products. You know, you're always thinking about the product life cycle. Is this, you know, fired to a really high spec that it will be durable, that people enjoy using it? You know, you can come back and add to that set. It's not about fashionable trends and finishes on dinnerware that's, you know, out of fashion. It does give you that sensibility that you know what you're leaving behind.
Yeah.
I always refer to my career when I look at kind of other designers and they're doing things very quickly and amazingly and lots of press. Like, I'm in this for 100 years. I don't really care if they're getting, you know, if it's comparable or an issue. And to, you know, longevity, you know, the way that we think within the business about product is that there's three pillars to think about in terms of durability. It's aesthetic durability, the thing's got to look like it could last, and it's not going to be ugly in 10 years' time, 5 years' time. Physical durability, it's got to be, you know, we do mostly commercial furniture for big buildings, like Suncorp will buy 500 stools or whatever, or a cafe will have 1,000 people a day. It's got to be really strong. But then the most important one, which I've spent the last kind of 2 years focusing on, is emotional durability. How do you build a brand where people want to hold on to it, not just for its physical presence, but actually an emotional attachment to that? And so that's been part of my job for 2 years now, is to build out a brand which people feel emotionally tied to, so that the value of the object is much more than just
retained.
Yeah. Which you've got 30 years of that. That's amazing.
But do you think that comes from like a passion that comes through your products? If you're passionate about it and it's like innate to you, do you think it's visible in the product in the end?
Not sure.
Do you feel
it? It is because it's considered.
Yeah.
If you're passionate about it, then there is more consideration into the detailing, the specification, even how you market it. But I think there's also that sort of last pillar that you're speaking about is about longevity. For it to be a brand that people are emotionally attached to, you need to be still on that journey. And, you know, it's about your values.
Yeah, that's like, you know, I guess the one thing, and I know we'll talk about marketing, whatever, later, but like that was the one thing that we changed 3 years. When COVID hit, we changed what we did for marketing instantly. You know, prior to the, you know, 5 years, the first 5 years of the business, we looked at all the other furniture and lighting and accessory brands and went, you know, this is the way you do it. Like, you just be a brand. Like, you act as a company and you just pretend that you're a we and you do a thing. And as soon as COVID hit, we went, why are we doing this? Like, why are we pretending that we're this big brand presence? Why don't we actually just be ourselves? And so for the past 3 years, and we've seen a massive rise, which is not intentional, massive rise in sales and just a greater interest in our brand, because we've started actually just being ourselves. Like, Adam and I are now just the key personalities of the brand. And it's, you know, we've talked to people about it before. It's going to be pretty hard to sell when it's, you know, our voices. But most importantly, I think that's the thing that people appreciate, is like, it's actually just people. It's not just a company.
It's transparency.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We've jumped a little bit ahead, but I want to follow that with Georgie, particularly her work, because you know, this third pillar that you talk about, the emotional, what resonates with what you do is that this idea that the object itself build a narrative through use, through so this longevity isn't so much about what's been imposed on it by authorship, but it actually has a life of its own once you let go of it. And you know, the notion of a blanket particularly during COVID times, must have been fantastic. But I just wanted to know how that is in your thinking.
Well, I mean, it's every day. Like, I might get a newborn baby that I get a photo sent to me of, this is our baby. It's wrapped up in a new Curio blanket, and seeing those, I never kind of envisioned being welcomed into so many homes, and that is a huge motivation every day to see that, and how the brand grows and how it's welcomed into so many homes globally, and that's a great feeling to see that. And as I grow, I'm still very, very small, so it's really exciting to open up new avenues, new places, and have that support from an audience everywhere. So it's been an amazing journey to be welcomed into so many homes. A blanket is actually quite a personal object, so I do get to see quite a lot of intimate photos. So newborn babies, bedrooms. I'm very lucky.
Yeah. Well, and I'm also lucky that in many ways you're responding to that. What a privilege it is to be able to work in a way that you don't have to come up with the solution in a way that it's presented to you. And it's a beautiful thing.
It's definitely not. I didn't think about that when I first started Curio, that I would see so much outside of this brand that I was building. And like, when you talk about Instagram, and you think when I first started, I thought about creating or curating this feed and showcasing a product, but the tangibility of Curio and the word of mouth and how people interact with it has really been a step that's now coming into it, and hearing and feeling that is beyond the internet. And it's like, that's a great feeling. Where on the people like today were like, oh, I really want a blanket, or hearing those things is nice.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So there's some thinking around new materialism, and that's exactly what it is. This idea that material is a co-author of what you do, and this notion of traditional authorship of artist, designer, whatever, is really challenged now, which is a great thing. Just stepping back a little, Shelley, we got some questions from the audience, so I said we'd be interactive, so I haven't really lived up to that. There's some questions around which you touched on. You employ a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Is that what you dreamed of or imagined when you started out? And the one that goes with that, maybe we just start with that, and I'll find the other one.
I think everything. I mean, over time, you just employ more people, and fortunately, I think. I definitely didn't dream of employing a lot of people. I just wanted to employ myself and earn enough money for myself doing something I love to do. And then somebody knocks on the door and says, I want 500 of those, or I need this, and all of a sudden I'm in a tiny little studio with a few international department stores asking for large quantities of things, and I'm not a person that says I can't do it. So I have to work out a way to do it. And, I moved the studio really quickly, and I worked out how to do it. And I guess I like problems to solve. It's always probably a strength of mine. I don't get afraid of that. So every time there would be another burst of growth. And now we kind of, I don't know, Tess, about the dreaming of having lots of people. People are the best part of the business and the worst part of the business. Absolutely. I mean, I love the whole team, but they really do take a lot of energy. And, if I thought I would be able to sit down, I bought a wheel recently because like a year,
probably 2 years ago.
And it's sitting in a corner and I can't get to it because there's too much else to do, and it usually entails spending time with people. So
Tess, just before you jump in, and this is probably flows nicely, is you not just have a large workforce, but you're managing highly skilled people You know, they're of a particular. You
Oh,
know,
some people
yeah.
come into mud with no skills.
Okay.
And like I would say, the majority of people that come through mud haven't
In production,
come from
yeah.
art school.
Ah.
They are. Some will, and we love it when they do because it's generally a more seamless thing. But it's really about, you know, somebody who's worked in a kitchen has got good dexterity and has soft, you know, basically doesn't break things. So they've got good
Light fingers,
light hands,
and quite centred.
and you know we do have a production process, so people work on different parts of the business. I don't know. We love when people have got great skills, and we respect all levels of skills.
Culturally, that's one of the really interesting things about mud is the inclusive culture. There's people from all different backgrounds, ages, abilities, interests, and that's what keeps it really interesting as a workforce, is that it's really dynamic. They're all working in a sort of supportive, collaborative way. But to grow, it's been you know, in 28 years you've grown to 100 people.
Yeah.
It has to be done in a sustainable way so that it can be considered and that it is, it's something that those people can rely on, and it's their welfare and their development, but also, you know, for a business that grows incredibly fast, there's not the security, the job security, you know, and they're, you know, it's an interesting journey. I think, you know, your longest employee is
Nearly 20 years.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and yeah, she's amazing. I don't know when she's going to retire. Probably after me. Yeah.
That's great. So just then following that through a little bit, the question is there a right time to leap? And I'd probably add to that, or is this something, if you did ask, you'd never actually begin? Leaping from what you can manage to something that's of a bigger vision, and Georgie, I'd probably throw in a couple of words there, resourceful and resilience.
Yeah.
Maybe when you're thinking about that time to leap.
I think we all have in common that we kind of know. We would have known that this was the direction, or at least to give it a go. I was at a point where I kind of it would go down a very corporate way, and I knew I wouldn't be happy, or just to give this a go. And that was where I wanted to try and do it. And it was, if something comes out of it, that's amazing. If nothing comes out of it, I can say that I've tried and I have leaped, and at least I'm going to feel good for flying for 3 seconds, whatever it may be, through that leap. But I think, every day from then, it's been resilience, and, things happen, machines break, yarn doesn't turn up, people are hard, there's all of those things, so you get back off and you do it again, and you jump and you jump and you jump. So I think we would all probably have similar stories, and to have done 28 years, that's amazing. That's incredible. To have 100 people, it's my wildest dreams to go that far, but it's amazing.
I'd leave with intuitiveness and naivety, and they're both really incredibly important. I mean, one of the most important things that we stand by with Dow Jones is our motto is anything but ordinary, and the purpose of that is that whenever we go to make a decision about projects or furniture, whatever we think, is this what everyone else is doing? Is the point that everyone else is doing it or not? And we try and think about rejecting ideas that we don't think are particularly interesting. I guess we're always trying to work on, just as one case example, and this is so random, but we're working on a collaboration with Arnott's Biscuits at the moment, and that came through some weird social media channel thing, and now we're just doing this thing with Arnott's. And
is it Jats with anchovies?
It's not.
Is it biscuits?
Huh?
Yeah.
No. It's a weird.
You can't say that and not tell us.
I can't tell. No. But that was just because we took a leap on something random. We still think that we just lead with that kind of intuition, making sure that it feels right, because only we know, and naivety. Looking at all the different factors to a decision to make, but then also doing the opposite to some of them, because some of those ideas are the best ones.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it really did strike me, the intuitive nature of all your works. It does seem to be evident in your thinking, and so there's a writer called Ian McEwan who you might know, and I'll just read this little bit about intuitiveness because I think it really is a really lovely piece. It's just a little extract. And beyond the pieces is the prospect of making a shape, a form that is self-sustaining, self-justifying and balanced in terms which you cannot quite define or prescribe. You will know it when you see it. You will know when you are satisfied. All this is making you excited and miserable. Have you got something, but do you have the energy, the patience, the talent to find out what it really is? Can you do it justice? What are the essential fragments? Perhaps you should start today by writing, discover more. Perhaps you need more time by the radiator. So I thought that really can encapsulate what a creative practice can look like. How do people feel about intuitiveness being a key in something that we are talking about, making a business that's responsible and sustainable and employs people? Do you think that could be a luxury, or do you think it's a necessity, as Dale says?
They're very quiet.
They are very quiet. Well, it's a no-brainer. It's an easy question.
Sorry?
Right. What is it? Yeah, that's a good point. Probably when you're not sure, maybe.
You've got to trust that subconscious brain, the conscious versus the subconscious. If a problem's really hard, don't deal with it in that moment, and then hope the subconscious brain comes to that. And that's part of the intuition we think of, is like that subconscious part of your brain.
Yeah. And what does it matter? Does it really matter in the end?
Probably not.
Yeah.
We'll get somewhere.
Yeah, it all leads somewhere, you think. Yeah, okay, great. So moving along, so obviously the importance of sustainability, economics, the planet and people. I guess COVID and fires and floods have all been really in our lives in the last couple of years. So for many of us, it's been a really a time of huge reflection. And we talked a little bit about the material sustainability, and last night I just happened to be watching for a brief moment The Graduate on TV, and Dustin Hoffman, as Ben was asked, what's your future? And he wasn't sure, and the guy saying to him, get into plastics. Plastics are the future. And what really, I just sort of was startled, and so what really is interesting is how plastics liberated us as a world, but it also entombed us. Let's just have a bit of a conversation around
It's interesting because is it the material of plastics, or is it the consumption, like the disposable nature? Georgie talking earlier about like drinking, you couldn't drink tap water in China and having to drink bottled water and then worrying about if that bottle had been in the sun. But it's that consumerist nature and the consumption and the volume. Anything's bad in
mass.
In mass, If your blankets were single-use blankets, then that would be terrible. But they're not. They're treasured items that are, valued and hopefully lasting a lifetime. But everything, it's the disposability of society. I think that's really a problem, which comes back to you wanting people to hold on to the product because of their love for the brand.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully, that adds longevity. And the best marker of that is we look at the second-hand market as that great representation. If the value halves or is under half, then maybe we're doing something wrong, but it retains its value after being, owned for years.
Yeah, yep. And the use of organic material and natural material, merino wool. It comes, and we talk about resilience and resourcefulness, and Australia riding on the sheep's back. You don't mention that in any of your publicity, but we'll get to marketing.
There's some coffee after this.
Chips, yeah.
And so I'm sort of thinking about how your businesses have adapted with this, very alive prospect of the planet not surviving if we keep consumption the way we're going, and what's your role in that? Because obviously you're not mass producing to the degree that and obviously not useless objects, which is also an interesting discussion. How do you feel about that? And what's
I think the other point in that is waste. That for us has been one of our big challenges of what do we do? I mean, everybody in that bag, you've got our waste. There's a gift of our waste to you.
In a positive way.
In a positive way. It's quite nice. It's quite nice what's in the bag. But we'd have a certain amount of contamination when you're working with 20 colours. There's a contamination process that happens with clay, and then what do you do with it? Once it's contaminated, it's not part of the, we could tint it up and make it darker, maybe some of it, but we really don't have very much waste because we've now worked out how to make a product out of that waste. And then the pieces that are broken, we've made a terrazzo trivets that we've been selling in store, which is, we're looking for more reasons to sort of work with our broken pieces because they're so beautiful when they're broken and used as a accent.
It's colourful confetti of porcelain that can be laid into a concrete floor as an aggregate. It's a really it's a great byproduct of what we do, but it's finding a practical purpose for that byproduct. Dale could maybe do that.
You could do like a tabletop.
So what we're talking about is individual instigators, we're all making active decisions while not talking to each other about it. And I think that's one of those really important things. I guess the reason why we don't put out much furniture very often, like a few pieces or a collection or two collections a year, is because we're too busy trying to work out how to make the thing as efficient as possible so there's no waste material. And we've been doing that since the beginning because it just made sense. I mean, that's where design education comes into, through education. But I mean, the story that we can share about just exporting of things, 4 or 5 years ago, we used to ship 40-foot containers of furniture to the US. Once a month would be a 40-foot container. And I don't know if you know, but furniture takes up very little room by volume of material. And so, it was fantastic money, it was great, but we just thought it was so incredibly wasteful to be shipping basically these empty containers by mass. And so we found a manufacturer in Michigan, and we take a tiny portion of that money by comparison to what we were making, because it just makes logical sense. And so these are just decisions we're all making individually.
The packaging idea is, obviously a one to consider. And as a recent subscriber to HelloFresh, I unsubscribed pretty quickly, and it even gives you a box to tick. Why did you unsubscribe? Too much packaging, and that's the reason. So a lovely example of how to reduce that. And is there more we can do? Do you think in the?
Oh gosh, we had a huge pivot away from, plastic-coated gift boxes. Essentially, it's a varnish that's on the paper with beautiful magnet closures and the same sort of finish on a shopping bag with metal eyelets and rope handles, and we shifted away from all of it, which is the sort of the expected norm that you are buying a premium product, you're getting a very premium glossy packaging with it. We shifted away from all of that to paper-based, compostable and recyclable packaging globally. And I think with the volume of product that, Mud alone as a business, it makes a huge difference. Like every little change actually makes a huge difference. That was a really positive shift for us as a business.
Yeah, and we're at all possible, buying Australian-made products, so we're not shipping things everywhere. We do ship things everywhere because we ship things overseas, and, the last few years, again, has been the logistics of keeping things on boats. I just had to go to New York to help a new manager unpack, shipments that had all squished together. So there was like
sea freight colliding into the same shipment.
Sea freight colliding into one shipment that was going to a tiny store in New York, and a new manager didn't know how to do it. So I went over and showed her, except it didn't all arrive. So I didn't quite get there, but I was coming back. So, but there are the logistics and what's been happening with freight and the charges, and there's a whole degree in that I think I've taught myself over 28 years of how to pack a box, how to get breakable items from point A to point B at a cost that is bearable and not lose all my money when that box gets sat on by an elephant somewhere along the path.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because it took the increase of freight costs for even well-intentioned businesses like us to pivot to sea freight, to actually look at it and take that step. And it's sort of that, if vegetables are cheap, you don't mind throwing half of them in the bin at the end of the week, but if you've grown it yourself, you'd never waste it, And I think, it's the same in everything we consume. There's a value in it that makes you sort of stop and think, and it's been a really positive change. We've pivoted from all air freight now to probably 75% sea freight. There's a huge difference on the planet.
Yeah.
And there's a task of the logistics behind it and the waiting game and all of that, but there's such a positive impact that we're making now.
I think as a designer, or if you've got your own brand, having every step along the way kind of considered and thought about, and then seeing that waste product and knowing that at some point you've paid for it as well, and knowing that, for me, when I see my waste pile, I'm like, we've made that. It's taken so much time for it to be there, not doing anything, and to still be like a great fibre or a material that's so workable in so many ways. That problem solving also mine comes in, and I'm like, I want to use this because it's still a great product. It's just, might have a default here and there, and workshopping ways for it to live another life is really inspiring, and having that kind of process now that a lot of people are thinking about is a really exciting way for young designers or people that are kind of just coming into it to have, like, as a full, circular economy on their
But it does take money to do that.
Yes,
and it takes
my
time.
waste costs nothing.
And it takes
product.
But it also takes time, and time that most people are very time poor to come up with the solution. So I'm really fortunate to have, Tess beside me and others that are coming saying, do better, or just looking at me to do better. That's like, my kids look at me to say, do better.
I think
this planet deserves better than this. So, we really push.
Yeah, having those questions put in front of you and answering them, and finding solutions is the exciting period that we're in now, to find that solution. Or I don't think for me, I don't think my business is at all perfect, and that's really nice knowing that at any point I can change, I can pivot to get there, to be more sustainable, to look at working with my farmers where my merino comes from, and look at the soil that they use and how that's going to be a regenerative farm, or it's kind of endless, and it's like, what scope do you go into? And it's that I find really exciting for innovation or sustainability.
Yeah, that absolutely, and there's great sort of thinking in anthropology around that the makers, the designers, the craftspeople are actually at the forefront of reusing these or developing these organic materials into new ways. So that's because of their knowledge. The not just the knowledge of the last 10 years, but the knowledge of the last 2,000 years that has come from doing and making and using materials. So I think we're all in a very interesting position to be not just challenged by that, but actually coming up with solutions and ideas around how that might be, which makes me think about technology and the handmade and what we call new technology, digital technology. How do we all feel about how that might be utilised? Is there opportunity where the digital technology can actually help us with that, with not just a sustainable approach, but that sort of emotional pillar approach as well?
Like outside of Dow Jones, I run a project called Friends and Associates, which is a collaborative project where I invite, each year we do a series of exhibitions which look at different topics, and the purpose of it is that we take no return, we don't make any money on sales or anything else, it's just about collaboration. And part of the reason why I started running exhibitions 10 years ago, so this year was my 14th show, and the purpose for that was to give allowance to designers to think more about their practice. And so I did a show in 2018, I think it was, called Welcome to Wasteland. It was meant to be this welcome to wasteland, like you walk into a room, it's this kind of circus of waste. And so I was able to invite like 27 different commercial practices and architects and designers to think about waste and give allowance to that space. And we did a show 2 years ago called A World You Don't Want, because the Melbourne Design Week theme was Design a World You Do Want. And we thought that was a little open-ended, so we decided to invite even people like Flax Studio, interior designers, to look at a world they didn't want, and on reflection, look at their own practice. And so giving the space and allowance to designers to create works that do think more about their practice, has been really interesting for me as well. Outside of just looking at technology of furniture and everything else, because there's like a million, and this is, I was mentioning this outside about just the fallacy of being a designer. Like, these are all the million things we're constantly thinking about. If something changes, we react. We've got to think about all the packaging, the design, and that's the kind of fallacy of social media, which is that you see a chair online and you think, wow, that looks easy, I could do that. But there's a million things that make up how that exists and gets shipped to a person, and they receive it, then they love it, and then what do they do with it afterwards? That's an offshoot of that question.
I think the things for me in our day-to-day, zero, zero being the accounting system, that kind of technology is a great thing that's sort of come into our business that is simplified, and that was, I can't even remember in the beginning what I was doing with my accountant, but I'm sure I was just handing over a whole lot of receipts and a whole lot of stuff and just going, I don't know, and then, but I am an absolute Luddite when it comes to technology. I don't embrace it. We've got our production manager is a young engineer, and he just likes to put everything into spreadsheets and spit out numbers, and I'm sitting there going, I don't know if this is going to work all the time, because there is something that when we talk about the intuitive nature of business that the technology for me doesn't always deliver, and I feel like it's not always right.
Yeah, there is technology for newness sake as well. So that was the business 3D printing shoes, the practicality of that, whether technology is actually progress or if it's a hindrance, and it's just a kind of new aesthetic. There are differences into what those new technologies do.
I think essentially people have been making pottery since, Pompeii or, cultures and communities, globally. It is a handmade product, and there are ways of automating ceramic production. But the thing that people love about mud is that it's handmade, and you can feel where someone's hand's been. It's a very tactile, intimate relationship you have with something that you eat food from, particularly. So I think it's, to take that away and standardise the product so it was incredibly uniform, you would actually lose the thing that people love about the product, that they love about the brand that they come back for. And that would be a loss, not a gain, even if it was a volume gain.
Yeah. Can I be a devil's advocate and say that that's a nostalgic argument?
Go ahead.
Do you think?
I love some machine-made pottery. I think it's extraordinary.
One of the questions is, would making all your products by machine be more practical?
Would it? I don't know. I have no idea how the machines would work. I don't know how that world works because I don't have it. But I don't know. People have often said to me, why don't you manufacture offshore? That was the big conversation pre-COVID, was why are you doing it here? It's obviously you're going to make more money if you go offshore. And the idea of doing that for me was not ever going to fly, because I'm too involved in the production process, and that means I would have to be wherever that production facility was. I think around the globe people make beautiful ceramics. I don't think there's a reason, except that I live in Australia and I want to be connected to it. But I think I do, I was at a Maison Kitsune cafe in Brooklyn just a couple of days ago, drinking out of this beautiful machine-made teacup and thinking how exquisite it was and how fine it was, and it was divine. But that's not. I can't make that. I don't know how to do that. I know how to make mud. That's all I know how to do.
What about, because you used the word technicians, which surprised me a little bit, yeah.
I think technology within the textile industry or material making industry is going to be a really big change within Australia, especially. So I'm probably hand in hand with like slow making or craft, but technology will support us in important ways, and that's mainly because we haven't supported our craft in some key processes. So having machinery that are going to enable that is going to, in my opinion, bring back a lot of life within smaller countries, not smaller, but the kind of like even America or Australia, to kind of create more opportunities. And I think I work with technicians and they're highly skilled, but that job hasn't been kind of, you know, a lot of people don't do that. I've trained to do that, and I'm probably one of the only people in Australia that could do that if I needed to. I work with one technician that he's basically my full-time technician for Curio at the moment, and outside of that, if he didn't want to do it, I would be in a very tight position where I would be lost for skill. So with innovation or that might help me. If there's a new software that's easy to use, I can train someone to be able to use that. If there's a new spinning machine that takes fleece and it does it on site, that's going to support, that's less space, that's less I think it's going to be huge in textiles, but I could probably talk about it all day.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Jeff, the metal fabricator, would probably really argue that.
I mean, we probably could get everything made by machines, but I just wouldn't have as nice a time. Like, it comes down to personal choice as well. Like, and maybe we'd sell less because it was all machine made. If we were telling people we didn't have Jeff and we didn't have our staff involved, and they had their own personal stories, and we know their kids and all of that, maybe that is what's really important to a company, is actually that legacy and nostalgia or anything else. But yeah, I could absolutely get everything made by machine, just don't want to.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a really important point. I was being a bit cheeky, of course, but this notion of sentimentality is always sort of driven home a little bit by people who hang on to notions of skill, and so I suppose my thinking around all that is that let's embrace it. Not apologise for it, but really be really, as you were saying, Georgie, that it's really a balance between maybe technology. Because I was going to ask, what happened to Australia Made but I don't need to. I mean, because we stopped manufacturing everything nearly, didn't we? So except mud.
I mean, a Curio is made in Reservoir in Melbourne completely, so it's not, and so it's Dowel, but there's links out of my practice that are not. It would be great to have it all within Australia, and I am at the moment all within Australia, but with skill kind of disappearing, it will be hard. Like for me to see 30 years ahead without innovation or technology, new machines, new software, there won't be textiles made within Australia at all because we don't have skill for it.
Yep.
Even getting somebody to maintain our kilns, that is has been one of the biggest nightmares we've had as a company. There's probably in New South Wales there's about 3 people that do maintenance. We've had to go offshore for our kiln supply because the kilns in Australia couldn't cope with our processes, for whatever reason. And we've flown somebody from the other side of the world to come and do the installation of our kilns and do the maintenance of our kilns. It is a problem, and we don't have that skill set here. 4 or 5 years ago I went to the Biennale at Stoke-on-Trent, and that's just the ghost town of pottery. It's these beautiful, multiply this by 50, and these beautiful spaces that are just empty. They're empty, and they were bustling, thriving cities, and there's all these skills. The taxi driver that picked me up was he was a kiln packer, you know. That was his profession. Now he would drive a taxi instead. And, you know, these people are dotted all over the planet. And we desperately need people. When we were talking earlier about, you know, do we have skilled workers, you know, people who are potters? Well, people who are doing their own practice don't really, some will come and work at mud a little bit, but, you know, we need people in there, you know, all day, every day. So, you know, finding the skill set of people who have their own practice or are potters and want to come and make mud all the time, that's not a realistic thing, because they don't. So finding people that we can train that want to do it, and we do have some, but yes.
Well, generally part-time, because they've got their own creative pursuits as well, and it's a very physical role, you know, if you're a thrower. You know, to then work full-time as well,
exactly. And for me, in academia, it's highlighted also that around the skill that the resurgence of ceramics in the academy is really around artists using it, not so much skilled ceramicists. They're still there, and it's great. But the real exposures often come from someone with a good idea, but doesn't really know how to transition that into a material form. So, which is, you know, it's a positive. It's a way of looking at it, I guess. So there's, you know, we all need to work together on that. How much do you think we've already said about what we, you know, how do we decide what we make and sell is valuable in a world with so much stuff? We sort of have touched on it.
I can say that everything that we make at Mud, apart from a couple of the really big things, are things that I need in my life. That they have all originated from my dining room table to, you know, a light fitting that I need in my house.
So they're utilitarian in a way, because everyone eats off a plate or a bowl or uses a mug. Yeah. It's not a frivolous product.
No.
We've always looked at purposefulness, you know, like our intention from the beginning was to fill as many interiors with Australian-made product as possible. And, you know, at the time that we started the company, there were not many small furniture brands, because there wasn't the accessibility to digital technology and social media and things to be able to advertise. And so when we think about working on tenders for projects or developing new collections, we're really talking about, you know, what other products, imported products, do we replace? And so a lot of the time, you know, I'll get a call from an architect saying like, oh, there's a boat which is stuck on its way from Italy and we can't get the furniture in time. Can we use your furniture instead? I'm like, it's the best call. Of course we can. Of course we'll replace that Italian furniture with ours. But, you know, until we become maybe too inefficient and maybe too slow and maybe it's less, you know, not as good for the environment for us to make work, maybe we'll do something else. And there is a nimbleness to all of what we do and agility, and I guess that's probably why we all got through to this point through COVID, is that we were able to be agile and kind of change up what we did.
Do you find that architects specify you because they're looking for something that has a smaller sort of carbon footprint?
Totally,
that's
more so now than ever.
Travelled less miles,
absolutely.
That's more considered.
Yeah, and so working with projects with Breed Architecture is obviously like an obvious link, but yeah, absolutely. You know, like we can say, come down to our factory in Geelong, you can see where your 400 stools are getting made by our staff. Like you can see the wood that's been delivered here, and it's coming through because it just makes sense.
Yeah, that's. I sort of was also thinking, and we've mentioned about narrative being a really important, perhaps what sets the things, the objects that you make. Versus the objects that maybe somebody else makes, and so storytelling is really important, and I just wonder how much more we are aware of that, and obviously you know, with the material qualities, how much we have really reckoned with Indigenous people on how we sort of think about what we do and how we do it, and you know, probably some really good lessons. So yeah, I'm interested if you've had any sort of interest in that and dealt with that, and you know, read about it. Yeah, is it something that you
Not specifically. I mean, there's so many lessons from
everyone,
Indigenous communities on land care and, you know, even politics. There's so many lessons we can learn. I don't know specifically about design and product, though, in that space.
Well, we work with the Artist Today for Wirelands, and we're actually trying to help them set up a studio in Adelaide at the moment. It's probably going to be a 5-year process, but to get them away from using sort of commercial moulds to put their artwork onto. So we've taken some of their shapes and things that are meaningful to them and trying to create moulds so that they can then have a production facility of their own to create their own shapes that are meaningful to put design onto. I mean, we do this sort of thing every year of, you know, providing them with our shapes to do as a blank canvas to put their artwork onto. And it was really interesting the first time we did it, that Nimity Burton she said that when she was painting, she started to sing, and they sing in the same when they're weaving. So it was sort of this lovely process of the women all coming together and singing and painting and showing each other how to do it. COVID had happened, so we'd sent everything down, but I could only do sort of like video calls, and it didn't translate very well, but they all taught each other through, you know, like a sewing circle kind of situation, but with song, and it was so joyous and wonderful. So I mean, I don't know whether that sort of.
So what's the favourite song at Mud with your 100 workers?
I don't know.
It would change.
Shelley loves karaoke, and
I do.
Dan, our
karaoke.
kiln packer, is a
He has his headphones in and he
passionate
sings
singer.
out of tune all day, quite loudly. Where it is sort of every different area has its own stereo, and they'll have different music playing, you know, top 40 over here, alternative, whatever, ska, something over there. And then, I don't know. Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles, I think, is one that lifts everybody's spirits at a very low moment in any day.
I have to put that on in the factory. Could get weird.
Yeah, exactly. So marketing, I've obviously left that to the last and probably not enough time. But I'm interested in how you all decided on your names, because that's probably one of the first things that you needed to do when it comes to marketing. And Curio is an interesting one, because you could have gone for Knick-Knack, Gigor, Grimcrack, Kickshaw, or Doodad. According to the thesaurus, so you went Curio.
Yeah, Curio was it, thankfully. That was a good list, though. But I love the word curio. I think it links really well to curiosity, and I think that's really important in my business and in general, and being a designer, having curiosity and kind of leading with that thought and kind of challenging every step and never being bored within the situation that you're in. Curio is a word for an old heirloom kind of cabinet where you store your beloved items, often your china or your mud, and I kind of wanted to bring that into 2022 or 2020 at the time, and have Curio as your whole house, your whole identity, your whole ecosystem of you as a human. And we no longer have this special cupboard that is just, you know, off in the corner that's only ever used at Christmas time. You invite people into your house, you're proud of your objects, you want to show them the table, you want them to eat off the really nice homemade plates, and that's every day in a house. So Curio means that. It's a big loaded word. Yeah. For 4 letters.
And Dale's got a great Curio cabinet for you with tattoos on it. So.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
That was one of my first photo shoots. I was very lucky.
So, Dale, your business now.
Well, so it's funny because we named the business 10 years ago, and I really didn't think I'd still be going by a silly name 10 years later. But our first product, so Ab and I met at university, and we designed a product called Mr. Dow Jones, which was our first lamp. The first thing we ever did was a lamp called Mr. Dow Jones, and it was made from Dowel. It looked like a little character, and then we quickly realized it was a silly name, but it's great for SEO. It meant that, which is where we started naming our products. You know, we have a coffee table called Bradley Hooper. There's nothing else on the internet called Bradley Hooper. So we started, our name is fed through into our product names, which is that it's really easy to find our products because no one calls anything those names.
And of course, mud.
Well, we're talking about silly names. So for the first couple of years in my business, I had a business partner who had separated from her husband at the time, and he actually said to her that she was common as mud. Oh. And it made me laugh so hard that we named the business Common as Mud. Just for that, just to let it resonate for a little while. She left the business and the market changed a bit. We just dropped the common as, and I probably would have stayed with mud, but it was already taken, so I needed to add something to it. And Mud Australia it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not when you became a murderer, was it?
No.
No, well, that's good. So, and of course, with COVID, this technology with marketing and face-to-face, how's that changed for you? I think, Dale, you mentioned it earlier about that it's probably added to your
It's accessibility, like I guess we always thought we were talking at people, and now we don't. Now we talk with people. Advertising and marketing doesn't have to be shouting at people about what you do. They can be actively involved. Like throughout COVID, we ran a mentoring program called One-on-One with anyone who could email. I'd do a Zoom call with them. We started a competition called Design from Home, where we gave away money to the winner and runner-up. And anyone could enter. We had an 8-year-old kid called Ben design a weird cabinet for his mum to put her wine. It really...
During COVID, that really sums up COVID.
I guess very much the way that we look at marketing is like... So we have a product called Polli, which is a side table, which we designed with people on Instagram. So it was like a Thursday, I was probably still in pajamas at 3 o'clock drinking wine, and I put an Instagram story out saying, let's design a table together. And so we had hundreds of submissions of different ideas, and as in like I started with the shape, it's not like I was stealing IP, and then the following day I went, let's name the product, and we had this big competition talking about naming the product, and the following week, I think it was within 4 days of launching it through those kind of competitions online, is that we had a brand new product which we designed with, I think it was 2,000 people.
Wow.
And it was really about, not just engaging people for engagement's sake, but actually getting people involved in a creative process. And what we felt like, I guess the reason why so much of what we did throughout lockdowns for social media is that I would get messages from people every day saying like, thank you for making my day a bit better. And I'm like, I'm just a guy in pajamas drinking wine talking about furniture, but if it makes your day better, I'll keep doing it. And so that's what we've done now for 3 years, is just follow on with that, like not shouting at people anymore.
Yeah, lovely few words.
Yeah, I think even starting Mud Talks, the vision was to stay connected, and particularly through COVID, it was a way of connecting with our customers and making it as accessible as possible, whether it was an online recording later or someone that could physically be there in person, and sharing interesting stories with different communities. It's not, it's obviously not it's not for revenue, it's more about giving back. Similar to the Shelley Simpson Ceramics Prize, it's more about,
exactly.
Finding a way where you can support communities and be, if you're in the position where you can be philanthropic, to share that with other people.
Mm. I mean, the other things that we do are things like baked in mud. We had a problem that people thought porcelain was fragile. It will break if you throw it on the floor, but it's actually a really durable product that you can do all kinds of things with. And so we flipped it on its head and said, roast a chicken in it. Show us what you can do. You want to win a dinner set? We're going to pick the best, recipe in somebody. And so they all started Instagramming and creating these amazing things. And you've got to be careful not to, the professional chefs come up with the slickest looking things. So kind of got to, you've got to steer clear of that and make sure that you're inclusive of the whole community. But I mean, that's another lovely way of marketing, but problem solving as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, beautiful.
Me?
Well, we can we can actually go on to the next, and you can put it
let's
together.
do it.
You can put it together. So, what makes you happy? Funny mistakes, positive stories. There you go. That all can wrap up into one.
I think for me, it's definitely going into my knitting factory, and just, you know, it's lovely when every single machine's on and it's knitting and the factory's humming. There's nothing. It's a bit weird when I walk in and it's silent. It's like, what's happened? What's going on? So I love every day, or when I get most days at the moment, going into the factory, seeing every machine, seeing everyone doing their job, their craft, what they're really skilled at doing, and all having lunch together. And it's as simple as that. And if that's everything that Curio is ever able to achieve, I think I'm pretty happy with that.
Great. And have you done a art piece with
it'd just be like, shh. Wouldn't be nice. I think most people would be like, oh.
Oh, well, that could grab people's attention.
Maybe.
It could be a marketing.
SMR.
Yeah, indeed. Shelley and Tess.
Definitely the day-to-day. I love that every day. My dog makes me happy. My
She
kids.
comes to work.
My dog comes to work. I'm a bit anxious about her at the moment. My kids make me happy. They're both, to some extent, come into mud, and my son can make from the beginning to end. And my daughter is standing over there, has put this whole event together. She's pretty amazing. Thank you, Violet. My partner works with, he quit his job and came and started working at Mud. So definitely the family, they're having them there, and, top chicks like this one, and that one down there. People who, the team that can be, people really are leaning in. That makes me really happy. People solving problems and helping me on this path, and, believing in what we do, and the customers that come in and sell to each other. George could tell you, they come in and they literally will say, this is my favourite piece, you should try this one, and we just stand back and let it do its thing. It's really great to have got to the end of this period of time and have such a generous group of people around me. It's great.
Yeah, I think, like similar to what Shelley and Georgie said, like seeing people really thrive and enjoy what they're doing is so satisfying, and moving forward in a positive direction. Like, I think the project that we did with 5 Mile Radius for the recycled terrazzo it felt so good. It was such a, satisfying project to work with really nice people to create something beautiful, to sort of change the perception of this byproduct and give it a value. There's those sort of steps in the right direction are so satisfying.
I mean, what does any creative want? Financial sustainability and creative freedom. So every day that I go to work and I have both financial sustainability and creative freedom is a good day. The ability to just take risks, and to take a risk and own that risk is really important. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of liberating to be able to try things and not care. Adam and I have never been so interested in being wealthy, which is liberating in itself, in that we can just do a lot of really niche, weird things and just enjoy it a lot.
Enjoy, yep. That's fantastic. I certainly concur with that. We'll have to save the funny muck-ups for another time.
Over a glass of wine.
That's absolutely right. But so that concludes. I think we're right on time. Well, yeah, pretty good. And so thank you all for coming. Craft Contemporary, great to be part of a wonderful festival. I'd personally like to thank the professionalism of what I've been involved in. I haven't done too much, just rolled up late. But the professionalism has been amazing. Like Violet's done an incredible job. That despite I was 2 hours late, I was still here on time. So that only happens through great organisation, and you can see by these incredible practices that's alive and well. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
We would like everybody to. You've got your little goodie bags. We've got the mugs that we have here are to take home with you. So if you'd like to take, I don't know, 1 or 2 or whatever, we've got some wrapping stuff at the back of the hall just to wrap that up and take it with you. The plates are our higher set, so you can't have those. They're used anyway. And there's also lots of, are they donuts? What are they called?
Crullets.
Whatever. For a moon up the back, so please make sure that I can't take them back to Sydney with me. Please eat. Thanks, guys.